So today we're going a deep dive into these two guys, Larry and Danny Rains.
Okay.
And, we've talked about sibling serial killers before.
Right.
But this is kind of a different case because they didn't actually work together.
Right.
Like, they both committed murders,
Yeah.
but they didn't commit murders together.
Yeah. It's very rare, actually.
Well, it's just kind of like what you sent us this article.
Yeah.
It's the Wikipedia article about the Rains brothers from Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Right.
And so this is going to be our deep dive. We're going to go deep into this article today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just kind of see what made these guys tick.
Yeah. Were they born to kill, or was it something that happened along the way?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Was it nature or was it nurture?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, right off the bat, we know that their childhood was really rough.
Extremely rough, yeah.
Like, I mean, just their father, he was
Yeah.
an alcoholic, abusive, and then just up and left.
Absolutely.
Just abandoned the family.
Yeah. I mean, just think about the impact that has on kids growing up in that environment.
Yeah.
It can't, there's no way it can't affect you. Right.
And then on top of that, they had this super competitive relationship.
They did, yeah. Even as kids,
Yeah.
like fighting over pennies, always trying to one-up each other.
Right.
It's like that competition, it never really went away. It manifested itself in different ways.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, the article talks about how, like, Larry, the older brother, he started showing problems really early on.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he was involved in car theft, assault. He even tried to kill himself when he was, like, 19.
That's right. And that suicide attempt, I mean, it's really disturbing.
Yeah.
He tried to suffocate himself with car exhaust.
Yeah.
It speaks to a really deep level of despair.
Right.
Like he was clearly struggling
Yeah.
with some serious inner turmoil.
Right, and then things escalate even further in 1964 with the murder of Gary Smock.
Right.
And so this is where it gets really scary, right?
Yeah.
Larry is hitchhiking. He gets picked up by this guy, Gary Smock.
Right.
And then Larry forces him into the trunk,
Yeah.
robs him, and then just shoots him.
Yeah, twice in the back of the head.
It's brutal.
Yeah, it's cold-blooded.
It's terrifying.
Absolutely. And what's even crazier is that he confessed to 4 other murders.
4 other murders. Wow.
Yeah, during that same time period.
So this guy was busy.
He was, yeah.
But here's the thing. He could only remember one of the victims' names.
That's right. He could only give a name for one of them.
It's so creepy.
Yeah.
And the article mentions that one of the victims might have been this guy, Vernon LeBen.
Yeah, who was, killed the day before his wedding.
Oh, my God.
It's a whole other level of tragedy, right?
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if there are other victims out there that we don't even know about.
Right. And so, okay, we've got Larry, this clearly troubled kid who turns into a killer.
Mm.
But here's where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
So Larry goes to prison.
Right.
And while he's in prison, Danny's criminal activity, it actually gets worse.
That's right. It escalates after Larry's locked up.
It's like his brother going to prison somehow, I don't know, set him off.
Yeah, it's like almost like a delayed reaction or something.
Right.
Or maybe like this darkness was always there in him.
Yeah.
Just waiting for the right moment to come out.
Yeah, and it makes you think about that whole, like, shared psychosis idea.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That theory that sometimes in close relationships,
Yeah.
you can have this kind of like transmission of a delusional belief system.
Wow.
And it happens a lot with siblings,
Wow.
It's pretty fascinating, but also really disturbing.
Right. And so, I mean, the first major crime that Danny commits is, I mean, it's terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
He assaults this woman, Dorothy King.
Right.
And he takes control of her car at gunpoint.
Yeah.
And he's planning to drive her to this secluded area.
And rape.
She manages to escape.
Yeah, thankfully.
But it's still, I mean, it's
chilling, right?
Yeah.
Like the level of premeditation there,
Yeah.
it's really scary.
So after serving time for that assault, he gets out of prison and he meets this teenager, Brent Coaster.
Right.
And Coaster has, like, a really rough background, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, his mother was schizophrenic.
Yeah.
His father was an alcoholic.
Right. It's just, like, a recipe for vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. And Danny, being the seasoned criminal that he is at this point,
Right.
he sees an opportunity, right?
Right.
He takes Coaster under his wing.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, I'll give you a place to stay. He gives him a job.
Yeah.
He kind of gives him this sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Which is, that's classic predatory behavior, right?
Yeah.
He's exploiting this kid's need for stability.
Right.
And guidance.
It's awful.
It is, yeah. And unfortunately, it's the beginning of this horrible killing spree.
Yeah.
They kill Linda Clark, Claudia Bidstrup, and Pamela Fairnow, all within a few months.
Yeah, and it's brutal.
It's brutal, yeah. I mean, they rape them.
Yeah.
They murder them.
And then they set the car on fire.
Yeah, in one case, they try to cover up the evidence by setting the car on fire.
Oh, it's sickening.
It is, yeah, and the level of violence, it seems like it escalates with each murder.
Yeah.
Which, that just, it points to this lack of remorse,
Right?
this growing sense of depravity.
And I think it's really interesting and kind of hard to wrap your head around Coaster's role in all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, he was young.
Yeah, he was.
He was impressionable,
Mm.
Clearly under Danny's influence.
Yeah.
But he still participated
He did.
in these horrific acts.
Yeah, and that's, it brings up this question of culpability, right?
Right.
Like, how much was he a victim of circumstance?
Right.
And how much was there something darker within him
Yeah.
that Danny was able to kind of exploit?
It's a question we're going to have to keep in mind.
We are, yes, especially when we get to Coaster's eventual release.
Yeah, so, okay, let's shift gears a little bit and go back to Larry for a second.
Okay.
So while Danny's out committing these murders,
Right.
Larry's in prison, and his life takes some really strange turns.
Yeah, it does.
He changes his name to Monk Steppenwolf.
Right.
He gets married.
And not just to anyone, but to his brother's ex-wife.
It's bizarre.
So strange, right?
Yeah. It's like he's trying to reinvent himself.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to erase his past.
Yeah.
Create this whole new persona.
Right, but even with all that,
Yeah.
he still struggles. The article talks about his suicide attempts.
Yeah.
He gets really into bodybuilding.
Yeah.
He even goes on this hunger strike that almost kills him. He's just constantly battling these demons.
Yeah, he is. It's like he's trying to find some kind of redemption,
Yeah.
but he just can't escape the weight of his actions.
And he also shows that he's still capable of manipulation, even in prison.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, he designs a crossbow for other inmates.
Yeah, to use
Yeah.
to kill another prisoner.
It's chilling.
Yeah, it's a reminder that, the potential for violence,
Yeah.
it doesn't just disappear because you're behind bars.
Oh, so we've got these two brothers, both serving life sentences.
Yeah.
And then their stories kind of come to an end in a way because Danny dies in prison in 2022.
Right.
And then Larry dies in prison in 2023.
But even with their deaths, the story isn't over.
Right, because there's still Brent Coaster, who
Yeah.
was sentenced to life, but with the possibility of parole.
And in a twist that I think a lot of people didn't see coming,
Yeah.
he was actually released in 2021.
Wow.
48 years after participating in these horrific murders.
It's a big question, right?
Yeah.
How does our justice system deal with a decision like that?
Right. I mean, how do you balance
Yeah.
the gravity of the crimes
Yeah.
with the possibility of rehabilitation?
Right.
It's a really complicated issue.
Yeah, and it's something we're going to have to unpack as we go further into this.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then
Right.
we'll come back and we'll really start to dig into, the why,
Yeah.
what factors might have contributed to these brothers' criminal behavior.
Right. What could have been done to prevent this?
Yeah.
What does Coaster's release tell us about our justice system?
Yeah, we'll get into all of that when we come back.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we talked about how messed up their childhood was,
Yeah.
but, how much did that actually affect them,
Right. Like, did it really shape who they became?
Yeah, were they, I don't know, destined to be criminals?
Right.
Or was it just, bad choices they made?
Yeah. It's that nature versus nurture debate.
Yeah, and this case is, a perfect example.
It really is.
Because we know their dad was, a terrible influence.
Yeah, he was abusive. He was
Yeah.
an alcoholic.
Yeah.
He abandoned them.
Yeah, and, studies have shown that kind of trauma,
Yeah.
it can actually change your brain.
Absolutely. Especially when it happens in childhood.
Yeah.
The parts of the brain that control emotions,
Yeah.
impulse control, all of that, it can be really affected.
So, not just emotional scars.
Right. It's physical changes
Yeah.
in the brain.
So is it possible that, those changes
Yeah.
made them more likely to be violent?
It's definitely something to consider. And we see that both of them
Yeah.
had problems from a young age.
Yeah.
Like Larry's early crimes,
Yeah.
the suicide attempt, that's not normal teenage stuff.
Right. Right.
That's a sign that something's really wrong.
And then with Danny, it's he didn't get really bad until Larry went to prison.
Right. Which is so interesting.
It's maybe, I don't know, seeing his brother become a killer, gave him permission
Yeah.
to do the same thing.
It's possible, there's this theory called folie à deux.
Folie à deux, what's that?
It's French for shared madness.
Oh, okay.
And it's this idea that in really close relationships,
Yeah.
one person's delusional beliefs can, like, transfer to the other person.
Wow, so you're saying, like, Larry's descent into violence,
Yeah.
it could have, like, planted a seed
Yeah.
in Danny's mind.
It's possible, but even if that's true, Danny still made the choice
Yeah.
to cultivate that seed, you know?
Right.
He chose to water it, to let it grow.
Right. He didn't have to become a killer.
Exactly. He had agency.
Yeah.
He made his own choices.
And the way he treated Brent Coaster, it's awful.
It is. Yeah. I mean, he was a kid from a really messed up home.
Yeah, super vulnerable.
And Danny just swooped in,
Yeah.
offered him a place to stay, a job,
Yeah.
a sense of belonging.
Like a father figure almost.
Yeah, but in a really twisted way.
Yeah, it's textbook grooming.
It is.
You know, just taking advantage of him.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that
Yeah.
even though Coaster was manipulated, he still made the choice
Yeah.
to participate in those murders.
Right, he wasn't forced.
Exactly. He crossed the line
Yeah.
from being a bystander
Yeah.
to being a perpetrator.
And that's what the parole board had to grapple with.
Sure.
Like, was he truly remorseful?
Yeah,
Had he changed?
right.
Was he still dangerous?
It's a tough call,
It is.
and I can only imagine how hard it was
Yeah.
for the victims' families
Oh, absolutely.
to see him released.
It's like, how do you ever come to terms with that?
Yeah, I don't know if you can.
So, okay, let's go back to Larry.
Hmm.
I mean, while all this is going on with Danny,
Right.
he's in prison and he's like trying to, I don't know, find himself or something.
Yeah, it changes his name. He gets
Yeah.
married to his brother's ex-wife.
Which is so weird.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
He goes through all these like extreme phases.
Yeah, the bodybuilding,
Yeah.
the hunger strike, it's almost like he's trying to punish himself.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's trying to control something
Yeah.
in an environment where he has no control.
Yeah. And then he designs that crossbow.
Right, for other inmates to use to kill someone.
So clearly he's still like capable of violence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a reminder that just because someone says they've changed
Yeah.
doesn't mean they actually have.
So we've got these two brothers,
Yeah.
both shaped by this like horrible childhood.
Right.
Both choose to become killers.
And they both die in prison.
Yeah, but their story,
Yeah.
it doesn't end there.
It doesn't, no, because we have to think about
Yeah.
the impact their crimes had.
Yeah, on the victims' families.
On Coaster.
Yeah, on the community.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect.
And it's a reminder that these kinds of crimes,
Yeah.
they don't just affect the people directly involved.
All right, they affect everyone.
Yeah.
It's like a tear in the fabric of society.
And sometimes those tears, they never fully heal.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
All right, well, we need to take a break here.
Okay.
But when we come back, we're going to talk about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Like, what can we learn from this case?
Right, what can we do to prevent
Yeah.
something like this from happening again?
We'll get into all of that after the break.
Yeah.
Man, this whole case, it's heavy, you know?
Yeah, it really is.
Like, all these people's
funny
lives
eyes.
just destroyed.
Yeah, it makes you think about the bigger picture, you know?
Yeah, like, what are the societal factors
Yeah.
that lead to this kind of violence?
Well, that's what are the root causes?
Exactly.
I mean, you can't just look at the individuals, you know?
Yeah.
You have to look at the systems
Yeah.
that are in place.
Like poverty.
Yeah, poverty, lack of access to mental health care,
Right.
social isolation, all that. It plays a role.
It's like one thing leads to another, and then
Yeah.
it all just, like, explodes.
And in the Raines brothers case, you know, you have this family
Yeah.
that's already struggling.
Yeah.
And then the father leaves.
And she was abusive.
Right, so they're left with nothing, basically.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that excuses their actions,
No, of course not.
but it's part of the story.
It is.
You know, it helps us understand how they got to that point.
And it makes you wonder, what if someone had intervened
Yeah.
early on, you know?
Like, what if they had access to, like, social services
Yeah.
or counseling?
Right, maybe things could have been different.
Maybe.
It's impossible to know for sure,
Right.
but it's a possibility.
It's heartbreaking to think about.
Yeah, it is.
But I think that's one of the things we can learn from this
Oh.
case.
Absolutely.
Like, we need to be more proactive
Yeah,
about addressing these systemic issues.
right. Prevention is key.
We can't just focus on punishment.
No, we have to stop these things from happening in the first place.
And then even when they do happen,
Yeah.
like, how do we support the victims?
Right. How do we help the families
Yeah.
who are left behind?
And how do we, I don't know, even define justice in a case like this?
Yeah, that's a tough one
It is.
because, like, with Coaster,
Yeah.
The parole board decided he had served his time.
Yeah, but can you imagine
Yeah.
being one of the victims' families?
Right, and having to live with that decision.
It's got to be just devastating.
It would be, yeah. And I don't know that there are any easy answers.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, there's no magic solution
Right.
to this kind of pain.
But maybe, I don't know, by talking about it,
Yeah.
by having these difficult conversations,
Yeah.
we can at least start to understand each other better.
And maybe that's a start, you know?
Yeah, I think so.
Like just being more compassionate,
Yeah.
more understanding.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today.
Okay.
This case, the Rains brothers, it's definitely one that's going to stick with me.
Me too.
It's just so sad.
It is.
And so disturbing.
Yeah. But I think there are some important lessons here.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, we have to address those systemic issues.
Right. We have to focus on prevention.
Yeah, and we have to support the victims.
And we have to remember that everyone involved in a case like this,
Yeah.
they're all human beings.
Right, with their own stories, their own complexities.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this case so fascinating.
And so tragic.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
And until next time, keep digging.
Keep asking questions.